저렇게 매겨 있어.
We don't want it with us. Thank you.
Welcome, see you when you're off the boat, make your way down the quay. If you're going to the castle, there's the granite archway at the end of the quay. You're going to the gardens, the far eastern side of the island. As the sailboats leave from the steps on the far side of the harbour, we'll keep running until the causeway opens. likely to be around about 3/4 of 4.
Wonderful.
There we are, my friends. Take your time. Step out when you're ready. All right, take care. All right, perfect. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Welcome. Take care.
Nie wiem. Ja ciebie na włam jakby wziął, nie? To ty byś w innym mieście najlepiej sprawdzała.
Avec les lunettes de soleil, on voit mieux.
Yeah, that's humble origins. It's just ill got. See?
Quando eu fui ver na voz, só vi que passou.
எங்க காசு தெரியுதோ அது மேல ஸ்டிக்கர் ஒட்டிடலாமா இருக்கு காசு மேல ஸ்டிக்கர் ஒட்டணும் காசு ஸ்டிக்கர் வச்சுக்கணும் நீ வச்சுக்கோ நான் வீட்டுக்கு போய் ஒட்டிக்கலாம் ஞாபகமா உன்னோட டெஸ்க்ல நான்
There's too much water right now. Let's just go here slowly. Use one minute. Slowly. Hold on to this. We'll walk down here. It's a bit slippery, but it might okay.
Next on the way.
Yeah.
You still with me?
Keep going.
Strong as long
Just keep walking.
Strong back.
Wait, look at some rubs it across this.
Or they like opened the wall.
Go get me.
चल
I Look, can you see? They're fishing. They're doing something with
வாட் மேன் அந்த போஸ் அப்ப கொடுக்கலாம்ல
তার সাথে তো আমি
Kan ook? Ik weet niet wie dat is. Dat is niet papa.
Yeah, it's a different person.
Ah, that's different.
Yeah, different. Yeah, we'll go around. Just chill around.
Is het wat geur? Waar is dat voor? Oh.
Miscellaneous products. Letter from a veiled politician. Luke Hitchers.
Sorry?
Roman Empire.
Wala na. Tourist na. Ah, kinuha mo niya ako.
This is the star.
So when you look at the picture going through the door left, that's what we used to look like before the takeoff. Yeah. This was the time frame. It used to be family monument. Last year, 4 years ago for the family.
Oh, okay.
It was James's major birthday. Yeah, he's 75 this year. Him and Mary will be off the island later on this year. His youngest son is living in Newcastle. With the wife and the children. Wow. Really exciting. Yes, Mary at the same
Just down here. I think it will be like one of those Giselles or that's probably.
Oh, right, look at this. 見唔到條路未啊？應該呢條路。好似係過去睇。但係點解睇睇唔使見到條路？
Did you see the sundial?
I told you to look from the other side so you can look properly.
Hindi ako marunong anak. Iba yung Nel, dala ka lang there. Balik ka dito, Anay. Balik ka da. Okay?
Yeah, and it's right on the edge as well. The path is all the way there.
That's why I said about doing that.
Maybe from your home to Canada.
唔係加價，即係你冇咗呢個感覺。Yeah, 20 miles.
No.
I'm too high up. I'm too high up, Daddy. Tea? We have the coins to the wizard.
Đưa đi à, bạn tỏi quả mà vẫn chưa tỏi quả mà.
Once you say no to.
Where can you go? Samson, where are you going? That's where I'm coming.
That's Nina watching.
Yeah, I really like it.
Well, this is like last year before I went away, the day before I went away.
Hi guys. Welcome to the chapel.
No.
I mean, level at 4 or 5 of them were down there today. Yeah, some of it. It's a bit hard work, this. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's not
Some guys sitting down.
yeah, let's get some nice olive oil. Olive oil. The stuff that makes you tan. Okay. Everyone can walk off,
Highest point on the island, church first, highest point. Yeah. They didn't want to quarry from the natural rock on the island because that was the foundation. So everything has to be done.
Careful.
There's no video where it's like girls trying to do a video and then her uncle or family you see that one? Yeah. Yeah? Bonito.
Mind your step. Mind your step. Everything is happening.
Thank you. Enjoy your visit. Good. Good. Just take care when you lay down. It's really, really good. Thank you.
You didn't jump. What did you do? Ah,
落去先能呢個男女同
Yeah, no, it's just not static. Right, give Daddy a rest. This is a bit uneven, so you've got to go slowly, slowly, not too much.
Can you get one here? Lei.
Lấy đỡ thế ra trước.
Thôi luôn đi như vậy. Cầm. Dạ. Không không.
Sai thôi.
He wants me to hold it. Freezing.